Hey everybody, here we're looking at an HP parts computer I got from the Goa Computer Works store for 20 bucks, and I've actually featured this system in a video already. I actually featured this computer in a computer cleanout video recently uploaded. And anyways, here is this computer again. And here's the story about it. It is, I've actually already tested this computer. The motherboard works fine. The power supply does not. Now you're probably thinking, oh yeah, this is one of them Bestech power supplies, the capacitors failed and you had to replace the power supply, right? Well, actually that's not quite the case. Yes, the original power supply in this computer did fail because this computer has a replacement power supply installed. Here's a look at that power supply. Let's go and pop the cover off and actually have a look inside this computer. Okay, here's a look inside this computer, and it's a really nice system. It is an AMD dual-core setup, has the AMD Athlon 64 X2 4200 plus CPU. This computer has an AMD 64 Live sticker on the front. The computer originally had a 250 gig hard drive, and I believe 2 gigs of RAM, something like that. Here's a look at the motherboard. This motherboard has multi-channel audio, probably I guess 7.1 channel, 5.1 channel, not exactly sure. Just know it has a bunch of hookups on the back. I'm not very good at judging how many channels a board has if I'm looking at the jacks. And it also has digital audio out. This motherboard has 4 DDR2 slots. Has a single NVIDIA GeForce 6100 SC chip. The older 6100 chips were actually had a separate south bridge, but this is all in one. Has one heatsink for one chip. We have a PCI Express times 16 slot, PCI Express times 1 slot, and 2 PCI slots. And a decent little heatsink. And here's what I have planned for this system. This computer has a Windows Vista sticker on the side, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to refurbish this computer. But I'm going to be using this motherboard. I have another motherboard just like this. The only difference is the other board only has 2 DDR2 DIMM slots, has less USB 2 ports, no FireWire, and your basic audio. And that motherboard is currently installed in the home theater computer. And here's a look at the IO shield plate on the back of the parts home theater computer. And you'll notice we have a lot less connections here. I only have 2 USB 2, an Ethernet, your basic audio connections, your VGA, and your PS2. No digital audio, no extra USB 2 ports, no high-end audio setup, that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be doing a nice little makeover on this computer pretty soon. That's why it's currently out of service. It needs to be upgraded to be digital cable car compliant, and that's what's going to be getting done to it next. And I'm going to feature that in a later video whenever that time comes. So along with the switcheroo of motherboards, I'll also be putting in a 300 gig hard drive. This will make this a decent little refurbished computer to sell. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull out that power supply. Okay, here's that power supply. And as I mentioned, when I tested the HP with this power supply installed, it would not turn on. Though when I installed a different power supply just outside the case, just hooked the wires up and everything, the system turned on just fine. So evidently there is an issue somewhere in this power supply. And this is an Antec Basic 300 watt. So basic power 350 watt. And this is an Antec Basic Power 350 watt unit. And here's a look at the spec label. piles of used specs. Okay, this power supply claims to have two separate 12-volt rails, and both of them are pretty low. Only, let's see, one of them is 10 amps and the other is 13 amps. On the 350 watt power supply, I think it'd be better off just to have a single 12-volt rail of about, I don't know, 18 amps, 20 amps, 22 amps, something like that. Just a single 12-volt rail. Because even though it says there's 10 amps on this rail and 13 amps on this rail, that equates to, that equals 23 amps total. I think you'd just be better off just having this as one single rail. So that way if you have a high-end CPU pulling more than 10 amps of 12-volt power, you'd be better off. So anyways, now with that said, this is a FSP Sparkle manufactured power supply. You can tell by looking at the back the way this transformer is, and by looking at this screw. On FSP units, many FSP units out there, they have the secondary heatsink screwed to the back of the power supply case. And now I'm going to have a look inside this thing. I'm going to pop the cover off and see what's inside. So of course we're going to cut our warranty seal. This thing might still be in the warranty, but I don't really care. I don't have the original receipt because I didn't buy it. Now normally Antec is a really decent brand, but they have been known to have capacitor issues, and Antec actually has their power supply manufactured by several different brands. For example, this is a FSP manufactured unit. Antec also has had some of their power supplies made by Channelwell. And here's a warranty sticker. It's so funny, it's peeled right off, didn't even break. I could almost stick it on. I'm just going to pop off that cover. Now when I plug this power supply in, when I last tested it, and that was several weeks ago, I did notice when I hit the switch that it didn't make any noises or anything, but it just didn't work. So I'm just curious to see what's going on here, if there's anything wrong with this power supply at all. And there's nothing wrong with it. At least it'll be a good video for you to see what's inside an Antec basic power 350 watt unit. Which of course many of my subscribers love my power supply videos, so anyways, let's see, we got another screw down here. This is one of those weird cases. This one of the casing is obviously manufactured by Antec, or manufactured for Antec, because it doesn't look like a typical FSP case. We got one more screw down here we gotta get. Cover's being really aggravating. There. Let's see. I don't think this power supply has that many hours on it, but we do have a bad capacitor. See, I figured that's exactly what it was. This thing has TPO capacitors in it. Let's see, on this. Oh, we got more bad caps. We got a lot of bad caps inside this thing. Many bad caps. I'm just going to take a quick look myself, and then I'll let you look. Let's see, almost all the TPO capacitors are bulging, with the exception of a select few. Okay, let's go and have a look. Not like I'm surprised at all. This power supply is built decently well though. However, it seems more like a 250 watt unit than it does a 350. So I'm a bit disappointed with Antec for that. Here's a look at our primary filtering stage. And of course on Sparkle units, this is to be expected. They have good input filtering stages. We have 2 coils, X capacitor, 2 Y capacitors. Let's see, another X capacitor under the AC plug. So this power supply has all the minimum required EMI filtering components. It also has MOVs, which you can barely see under the glue. You get a closer focus so you can see a little better. There's one of the back capacitors. Look under the secondary heatsink where it goes around. That capacitor is in a not so good spot. It's got heat on the left side and got heat over top it. So obviously the heat is what's making these things fail. And over here is another bad TPO capacitor. You can see it is next to one of the coils. It's in between the 3.3 volt inductor coil, and there is a PI filter on the other side of it. And on the other side of that PI filter and next to the 3.3 volt wires, we have another bulging TPO capacitor. And let's see, on back little ways, you'll notice under the blue minus 12 volt wire we have another bulging TPO capacitor, and this one's actually leaking a little bit too. So yeah, this power supply does have quite a few bad capacitors, and it just blows my mind with power supplies nowadays. And of course, it's not really the manufacturer's fault. Well, it is in a way for the brands of capacitors they choose, but you just think about it. The Bestech 300 watt power supply that was originally in the HP is probably a Bestech, more than likely. Probably had bad TPO capacitors. I get them all the time, and just replacing the bad TPO capacitors with new caps or harvested capacitors off motherboards fixes them and they start working again. So whoever owned this HP replaced the dead Bestech power supply with an Antec, and this Antec also has TPO capacitors, and these TPO capacitors failed, so you get a repeat. So if your power supply, no matter what brand it is, if it has any TPO or Capzon electrolytic capacitors, expect that power supply to fail within a year or two. This is a general idea of how long it'll last. Because if you look on Cube Computer Channel, you'll notice I have many videos about Bestechs and other units with TPO capacitors or Capzons failing, causing the power supply to stop working. And every one of those power supplies I have recapped. I replaced all the bad caps, and they started working again. And this is the same thing when it comes to Hypro power supplies too. I've actually had to recap a few Hypros. 2 nice 300 watt units out of HPs. Had to recap those, and they were working to begin with, but they still had to be recapped because almost all the TPOs were bad in them. Anyways, you get the idea. This is just another bad power supply because of the capacitors. Simply replace those capacitors and this power supply will start working again. And I might actually make a tutorial on how to recap a power supply in another video, depending on what kind of day I'm actually having. Some days I don't feel like digging out the camera, other days I don't mind doing it. So what I'll do is I'll dig out some harvested capacitors. I think I actually have the capacitors this thing needs, and I'll be recapping this power supply pretty soon. So anyways, had any questions or comments? Feel free to ask, and thanks for watching.